don't know the power of the dark side.
Strength, mastery,
Your destiny lies with me.
but weakness, folly, failure also. Yes, failure most of all. The greatest teacher failure is. Fear leads to anger. Anger leads to hate. Hate leads to suffering.
Force will be with you, always.
The Force is strong with you.
Trust only in the Force.
So recently I played through Star Wars Jedi Survivor, and I've got to say, I was very mid on it. This game is the sequel to Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order, and for the most part, this sequel fails to live up to something that was an incredible experience the first time around. For me personally, I wasn't the biggest fan of the Star Wars Jedi game that came out before. I thought it was very boring for the most part. While it did have some intriguing and very fun ideas, for the most part, it was a very bloated, boring game that really didn't live up to the hype that most people had. And while this game came out a couple years ago, I didn't really play it when it first came out. I really wasn't interested, because the last time I went down this road, I didn't have a whole lot of fun. The Star Wars franchise as a whole, especially under the Disney regime, hasn't been as fun as Disney has tried to make it. They have had failure after failure after failure come out, and they have just oversaturated the market with so much Star Wars content, and not all of it, practically none of it, is any fun anymore. That being said, this game does have some fun to be had. There is a lot to enjoy in this game. I think that this game does have a very beautiful landscape. I think this game is probably the best Star Wars has ever looked in a long time. This game looks gorgeous. The landscape, the visuals, when it renders properly, is beautiful looking. When you're traversing the worlds, you can see so much already. Literally, the first world that you go to, Koba, is practically and mostly speaking the central hub of this game. It is where you're going to be spending the majority of your time. And as a place where you're going to be spending the majority of your time, it looks incredible. It is beautiful. The landscape is just so detailed and rich. And it is full of fun secrets for you to find. You can go hours on this planet and you can find so much that it will just take you hours to find it all. It literally is one of the best planets in the game. So in this game, there are a total of 6 planets for you to explore. Some are smaller than others, and there are 2 that you unlock in the later sections of the game. And most of them are very detailed to the point where you can spend literally hours on each of these planets trying to find all the collectibles, trying to find all the hidden secrets, and even some cameos that you might even enjoy. And to traverse these worlds, you have a selection of abilities in order to traverse these worlds and find each of these collectibles. Most of these gameplay mechanics that you will unlock through the story, but starting out, thankfully, it's not like some of the other games in other franchises where if you start out in a new game, you have none of the abilities that you had in the previous game. Now, most of these abilities you do unlock through the story progression, but it is so good, so gratifying to still have the abilities that you ended with at the end of Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order. For the most part, it has been a while since I've played Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order, but I am pretty sure there are some abilities that you had in that game that you don't have in this. I am almost 100% certain that there was an ability where you could force freeze people. Wrong! But the gameplay in this is surprisingly fun. Depending on which difficulty that you play this on, it could be either the best gaming experience or the worst. For me personally, I played it on Jedi Knight. It was easily the best experience that I've had, but I know other people have played it on Jedi Grandmaster mode, and for the most part, that was the biggest nightmare that those people could have ever done. And that's one thing that could be said in this game. The gameplay, at least the difficulty settings, are not evenly optimized for player experience. Some experiences or some difficulties are far less forgiving than the other. Because I played this on Jedi Knight mode the entire way through, the scaling of some of these enemies was ridiculous. If players are having so much difficulty on the base level game, then there is a problem with your gameplay. If you are in the middle section of the game, you've got 6 stems, and you're fighting one enemy, then you've got a problem. You shouldn't have to scale it down just to beat each standard enemies in this game. I do understand that if it's a boss, and you've scaled up the difficulty by quite a bit, and that's fine. I think that's okay, because I think bosses in games should present a challenge for you as the player. The enemies along the way should have some challenge in them also, but shouldn't be to the level of the bosses. The bosses should be the ones where you struggle the most, because that is where the challenge should be. I'm going to be getting into specifics of the story, so if you haven't played the game, you should probably go and play the game first and then come back and watch this, because I do think that after all I'm about to say, I do think the game is worth playing if you haven't played it and you're a fan of Star Wars. It does have fun moments. It does have interesting characters. It does have interesting bosses. But, that being said, I am going to get into spoilers, so if you haven't played the game, go play it first and then come back. The story of this game follows Cal some years after Jedi Fallen Order. He's clearly been through some stuff. This game opens up on Coruscant, and Cal's a captive of these people, and immediately you have questions rising in your head, like, how did Cal get captured? Why are we on Coruscant? Why are we anywhere around this particular area? And some of those questions do get answered as you play along, but this does raise one of the first problems with this game and its story. The first problem I have is that a lot of what is said and a lot of what is done in this game, it comes down to, how shall I say, prequel writing.
Sabotaging weapons depots, disrupting supply lines, flaunting this for everyone to see. The failed coup on Norset.
I haven't felt you this tense since we fell into that nest of Gundarks.
You'll be listening to a character be like, oh yeah, you remember that one time that you did this off screen? And you'll be sitting there as the player being like, no.
What are you doing? What are you doing? No, what are you doing?
Now, I love the prequels, but I have to admit that the prequels do have some pretty bad writing. But at first, the story does seem to be following along with what Jedi Fallen Order had started. Cal's fighting the Empire, Cal's versing all of the Inquisitors, Darth Vader, and all of that, and he's making a nuisance of himself.
Casters!
But then it kind of does a whole switcheroo, and then the Empire just sort of takes a back seat, and they are barely in the game. It was kind of a weird choice. I don't know why this was the case, because I feel like this story would be of interest to the Empire. Like, I get the whole idea is that the Empire has no idea of what's going on. The Empire has never heard of this particular planet ever. But the fact that a new Force user turns to the dark side and it doesn't raise any eyebrows for the Empire, especially the Emperor, who has been able to sense other dark side users before.
There is a great disturbance in the Force.
I have felt it.
It raised a few questions in my head because I was like, where's the Empire? Where's Darth Vader? Where are the Inquisitors? Where are all of these people that have been hunting Cal down for years? It was the first time that I really had a problem with the story of this game, because the Empire was such a big presence in the last game, and we had the most amazing villain in Trilla, the second sister from the last game, and she had such a connection to the story as a whole that they were trying to tell. Her connection with Sio, her connection with Cal, her connection with the Force, everything. everything played out like it was all one big cohesive story. But everything that happens here kind of happens by accident. It almost happens as if none of it should have. Like, if this story was never told, it would change nothing. And to elaborate on this just a little bit more, because I don't really talk about this later in the video when I start talking about the villains, but Dagan Gera and Ravis, both in this game, are nothing in comparison to Trilla from the last game. Because Trilla, as a presence, she was felt. Every time that you turned a corner, you were worried that she was going to be there and basically wreck your day. Her presence throughout the game was just so much better than what they do in this game, because Dagan is just kind of a guy that's just there. With Trilla, she always felt like a presence that you needed to be worried about. Like, she was always going to find you. She was always going to come for you no matter what you did. So the entire game, you're sitting there, you're worried that she's going to come for you, and you're worried about how she's going to do it. Who knows what she's going to do? And the fact that she has such a connection with Sia really brings the group together a whole lot better than in this game. Because in this game, the group have a goal, sure. The overarching necessity to find this goal just doesn't feel as urgent as it was in the last game. Because in the last game, they were trying to find a holocron. They were trying to find a new way to train Jedi in order to combat the Empire. But in this, it's just like, there's a planet that we can find that the Empire know nothing about. It's the most basic, boring plot that you could have ever thought of. And the villains in this game, they do nothing to support this. They do nothing to add to a level of threat that the Empire had in the last game. Because the Empire was a presence. The Empire was felt in the last game. It was such a big deal. And you knew that that at any point, someone from the Empire could just turn up and just ruin your day. The Empire mean nothing in this game. They have like a couple scenes and that's it. That's literally it. They feel like such an extra in this game. Really get the impression by the ending of the last game that the Empire was going to be a bigger deal. The Empire was going to be a bigger threat. Trilla's last words were avenge us. And then we spend the rest of this game just doing absolutely nothing with the Empire other than trying to escape them. It just felt so weird. But I do think that this is simply because these games are technically canon in the Star Wars lore, so Cal can't take down the Empire. That story element is just taken out of this story. So I kind of feel like they shot themselves in the foot by making the Empire such a big deal in the last game, because throughout these 3 games, the Empire can turn up and Cal can be like, yeah, I'm going to take down the Empire. But we know that's not the case. We know that doesn't happen because the Empire gets taken down by Luke. So I don't know. It was just a weird detail. So eventually you come across these people from the Old Republic. This was an interesting idea, but I don't think they did a lot with it. I don't think they did enough with it, because the Old Republic is such a fascinating concept. It's such a fascinating era that Disney has just refused to ever touch. And the fact that they had it in this game, I was excited. I was so excited because I was like, oh my god, they're actually going to do something with this concept. And they basically do nothing with it. So they introduce a character called Dagan Gera, and this guy is from the Old Republic, right? But the idea that he is from the Old Republic doesn't really ever play into the story. He could have been any old schmo from the standard Republic that we remember from the prequels, and it would have been no different. The fact that he's from the Old Republic changes nothing about the story. It really doesn't. And this was the biggest irritants of this story, is that it has a lot of cool ideas, but it goes nowhere with them. So basically, the entirety of this story is Cal trying to find a way to get to a planet that the Empire has never heard about, a planet called Tanalor. It is literally a planet behind a black hole. So then we have the characters of this game. Hi, me again. I basically started out this section talking about a whole bunch of different characters, starting with Marin. Basically, originally when I recorded the video, I started talking about Marin and how I didn't think that her character had gotten a lot of development and how her character really doesn't get a whole lot to do in this game. And while I still stand by the fact that she doesn't really get a whole lot to do in this game, I did want to backtrack a little bit because I was way off when I was saying that she doesn't really get a whole lot of development. In fact, she and Cal probably get the most development throughout the game. Because in the last game, when we last saw Marin, she was an angry recluse on Dathomir. The entire story revolves around how she, or at least her entire story revolves around the fact that she is resentful of basically everybody. Dathomir is a place that got really fucked up in the Clone Wars. Her reluctance to want to help other people was an interesting point, or an interesting part of the last game that I'm glad that they kind of keep going with that. Because now that she's gotten off of Dathomir, and now that she's actually exploring the galaxy, she's learned a whole lot. We don't see a lot of that development. The way that her character has developed, the way that her character is portrayed in this game, I think is really good. Because for one, she's not as disgusted by other people anymore. In fact, she spends a lot of her screen time actually trying to help as many people as she can. Yeah, she has her moments where she just enjoys brutally murdering people, but it's also her development with the relationship with Cal that really shines through in this game, because the two of them really do have a very similar story, and the fact that they went all the way with that, basically, it really is a highlight of the game. The fact that these two characters can have such a similar background, such a similar interest, or such similar tragedy, and they both don't let that define them. I love the line that she has at the end of the game, where it's like, it is part of you, but it does not have to define you.
This pain is yours. It is part of you.
When my mother died, it changed Papa. And me too, I guess.
Yes. But it does not have to define you. And you must not let it consume you.
Because both Cal and Marin have pretty similar trajectories when it comes to this, because obviously by the end of this game, Cal is more leaning towards the dark side than he was at the start of the game. Like, he was kind of dipping into it, but by the end of the game, you can really feel that it's only going to take like a bump on the head to really push him over. And I like the parallel between the two, and I really hope that it actually gets developed more in the next game. And characters like Sia really get butchered in this game. And I don't mean physically, I mean from a writing standpoint. So Sia is now like a monk, and she's been living on this planet. She's been trying to rebuild the Jedi archives, and she's been basically harboring fugitives for however many years she's been away from the crew. That's really it. Her character doesn't really get any development in this story. And then she dies, and we're supposed to feel so much emotion for it. So much like, oh my god, this mentor figure just died. Like, it's like Yoda passing. But it's really not a satisfying ending for this character. Because yeah, she fights Darth Vader and gets mugged. Her character doesn't get any development other than the fact that now she's found some sort of peace with all of this like refugee shit that's going on. And none of that really plays into the story either. Because I get that the whole story in this is like, we need to find a safe place from the Empire for the hidden passage. We never see the hidden passage. We never see these people that they are trying to hide from the Empire. So all of these people that the story is revolving around, we don't see it as players. So if we don't see it, why do we care? It's one thing to turn around and say that the Empire is bad and these people are trying to get away from them, but showing not telling is a key facet of storytelling, and the fact that this story tries to do so much without showing any of it, it really irritates me. But I will say that the only character that really does get at least some kind of development in this game is Cal. Cal is a lot more seasoned in this game, which is a very much needed change from before. Because in the last game, he was just a very straight-cut Padawan. And while that was necessary for the game, because it was basically a young kid learning about how to use the Force and learning about his place in the galaxy, learning how to cope with his grief, his fear, all of that. It was really necessary for that game. But this game takes Cal and gives him some edge. And I like it, because now Cal feels more like a real person, like he's dealing with real consequences for his actions. One of the biggest character motivations for Cal in this game is still loss, because a lot of his choices have really done nothing to impact anything. All it's really done is get people killed. But even that has a problem in this story, because in the prologue, right? In the prologue, you get introduced to this new merry band of misfits that Cal has been hanging around, that they're apparently best friends with, that they're so close to, and they die immediately. I am literally not joking. All of them, except one, get killed immediately. And I will say, this game is also predictable in that manner, because when I was playing this prologue, I immediately called that every single one of these people would end up dead.
Cooperation.
Both of these two, they're gonna die. I'm already predicting this. She's probably dead too. He's gonna die. All these two are gonna be dead. Like, these two will probably be first. But I'm definitely predicting this fucker's death. Call it. Wait a minute. And I called it. They all die immediately. Immediately. The amount of screen time that these people have is about 1 minute. You get introduced to them, you board this ship, and then they die. That's it. That is literally all of the screen time that they get. That is it. And speaking of predictable, this game is even more predictable when they introduce the character of Bode. Now, I will say, there is a facet of this character that I didn't see coming, because it was the most dumb shit on the planet, and we'll get there. When Bode gets introduced, he starts going on this whole story about his daughter and how he wants to find a safe place so that she doesn't have to live in fear of the Empire. And immediately, as soon as he started saying this, I turned around and said, he is going to die, and you are going to recruit this girl so that she will become a Jedi with Cal. And guess what? That's exactly what happened. This game is so predictable for no reason.
At least I can provide for him.
100% going to die.
Must be hard, being away from her. Is her mother?
Guaranteed. By the end of this prologue, this man is dead.
The Empire took her from us.
I am calling it right
Sorry.
now. This man is going to die.
Taking a lot of people.
If he doesn't die, I will be surprised. I'm also predicting that kid has Jedi powers. So Charles is going to die, and his kid is going to have Force powers, and Cal is going to recruit her. Guaranteed. 100%. A predictable story doesn't necessarily mean bad. There are stories out there, there are movies out there that have a predictable plot, that are so predictable to the point where you are like, I can see this coming, but they have satisfaction in the obvious. Sometimes it is satisfying to have an obvious story, but this story has been told. It has been done before better than this. But that being said, this game has a companion system, similar to the likes of God of War, where you have Atreus through the entirety of the game, and you can use Atreus to distract enemies, to attack enemies, even to beat enemies for you. And this game uses a similar method, but it's not as well implemented as it is in something like God of War. For one, for the most part, when these characters are with you, they're with you for about 5 minutes. They barely spend any time with you, so you don't really get a moment to enjoy the fact that they're with you, because within like a few minutes, they'll find an excuse to fuck off. At the midway point, when you're going to fight this excavator with Marin, at 2 separate points in this particular moment, she finds a reason to go fuck off somewhere. You come up with a little prompt and be like, hey, she's going to go distract the Empire while you just sort of do you. And it's like, why are you separating these two? If you're really gonna commit to having a companion system in this story, in this game, why don't you commit to it? Why don't you just have these two people hang out for several hours, for the entire game even? Wouldn't that be okay? Like, why would you not want to do that? Marin is a fantastic gameplay companion because she's OP as hell. Or, if you want to commit to the story aspect, why don't you make Bode your companion the entire game? You're gonna fuck that up anyway, so why don't you just stick with it the entire game? Okay, I can't hold off any longer, so I'm gonna get into the bad of this game. After you free Dagon Gera from the Bacta tank, immediately after that, you go and find Sia. And then Sia turns around and is like, well, you're going to need a compass in order to get to this place. Okay, sure. So you go and find one. It's broken. So then you go and find a second one. It's broken. This game has so much filler, so much fluff, that I literally could have finished this game in about 2 hours. That is how much fluff is in this game. And an easy example is in the prologue. So the first thing that happens, when Cal gets confronted with the Senator, he immediately breaks out, he starts killing all the stormtroopers, but then the Senator tries to get away. But then you basically stop the ship and it crashes into you, and then you have to spend like 20-30 minutes trying to get back to that ship just to get one piece of information, and then you fight the Ninth Sister, and then you're done. And that being said, this game also has a Last Jedi approach to some of these characters. Take the Ninth Sister, for example, right? So the Ninth Sister in the last game, you fight her, you cut her arm off, and then she supposedly dies. She should have stayed dead, honestly, because she comes back into this game, into the prologue, and then immediately dies. What was the point of bringing her back? I'm genuinely asking, what was the point of bringing her back if you're just going to kill her immediately? Captain Phasma is jealous of the amount of screen time that the Ninth Sister gets compared to her, but you still did the exact same thing. Captain Phasma was in The Force Awakens, and then she just unceremoniously dies off screen, and then she comes back in The Last Jedi and then dies again. At the very least, the Ninth Sister got a line to speak. At the very least, the Ninth Sister got a cool fight to go out in. Captain Phasma gets bashed over the head and then just falls into a pit and then poof, done. Gone. Dead. See you never.
Masana!
How are you just
You were a
standing?
Jedi Knight before you betrayed our order. Your name was Masana Tide.
What is she, the Hulk?
It's time to set you free.
Well, it was nice to bring that character back just to kill them again. They're really doing the Last Jedi kind of crap with this game. It's like, yeah, that character that was kind of okay in the last one, yeah, we brought them back so that we could kill them immediately. Again, they barely do anything. We just kill them. I genuinely don't understand some of the choices that this game makes, because it has a predictable plot for one. it has useless characters for another, and then it also has a ridiculous plot twist later on. We're not there yet, but we'll get there. In this game, there are basically two main villains. Three technically, but we'll get there. Two main villains. One is Dagan Gera, the other is Grease. Grease? No. Ravis. Grease is a secret villain, everybody. It's his cooking. He's gonna kill us all. Ravis literally looks like you could take him out and put him in with like Halo 5, with a group of Halo 5 guys, and it would look no different. He looks so out of place in this Star Wars game. It looks so weird. You encountered this guy a few times. You end up cutting off his arm, but then it just sort of has like tentacles that grow back inside of the gauntlet. So then you're sort of like, is this guy gonna like morph into like some kind of body horror guy from like Resident Evil? And it just turns into a pure horror game for a second. It doesn't do that, but it does have a pretty sick moment where when you finally meet up with him and you you destroy his armor, and then he starts taking it off, and then his arm just sort of grows out of it, and it kind of really looks like a horrific sight. But then you fight this guy, and he goes out in a pretty respectable way. He's kind of like a Spartan, right? Like, he just enjoys battle. He just enjoys being in a fight. And he's also a guy that values honor above anything else. So if you're fighting him, you better kill him if you beat him. So then you fight him, you beat him, and then he's like, I don't want to live with the fact that I've gotten beaten, so kill me, please.
After all these centuries, I still dream of Tanalorr. I had hoped to see it again, but... that is not to be. This Dagan Gera stands in your way.
You don't have to do this.
Only one of you will reach Tanalorr. Jedi, give me my warrior's death. Now!
When you finally meet back up with Dagan Gera for the third time, so you fight him 3 times in this game, and I'm not going to lie, I beat him on my first couple of tries in the first 2 fights, but in the third fight, he really made me work for it, and I was so glad, because after I fought him the first couple of times, I was like, oh my god, this guy's so easy. Please throw out something in the next fight so that it is at least interesting. I don't just want to punk him and then just be done with it. And to my surprise, he did. He actually pulled out quite a few moves, and I was stuck there for a while, which was great because I really enjoy a good fight once in a while. I don't like just, fighting through all of these characters and then just being done with it. I like a challenging boss fight that actually makes me work for it. But then we get to a plot twist that is the most out of nowhere, out of left field, ridiculous bullshit that I have ever seen in a Star Wars show, in a Star Wars game, Star Wars media. This has topped the most bullshit plot twist that I have ever seen in my life. So, you remember Bode? Yeah, he's the main villain of the story. So, throughout this story, Bode has been talking consistently about how he's trying to find a safe place for his daughter, to escape the Empire, to never have to worry about them ever again. And as luck would have it, Tanalorr just happened to be the perfect spot to do it, because then he doesn't have to worry about trying to keep his daughter safe from the Empire, because the Empire has no idea that it exists. And that's all fine and dandy, but then you get to this point where he just decides, you know what, fuck this, I'm just gonna kill everyone, I'm gonna steal the compass, and then I'm gonna run away. I'm not gonna lie, I wanted to kill him immediately. Even when they try to explain it. So after you finish chasing him, you fight Vader, Seer dies, whatever. When you catch up with him, he turns around and he's like, yeah, I actually tricked you into coming here so that you could destroy the Empire, or like this base of Empire, so that like I could free my daughter. I'm sorry? That's your excuse? That's your excuse for all of this? This was the most unnecessary shit on the planet. I am not joking. He literally says to you, I was trying to escape the Empire. I tricked you into coming here so that you could kill the Empire so that I could escape with my daughter. Why didn't you just team up with Cal in the first place, save your daughter from the Empire, and then you could have had the exact same result? Isn't that a genius plan? That would have been a genius plan to me. Like, this was so unnecessary. All of this was so unnecessary. You literally spend hours with this guy, and he even turns around and he's like, I developed a relationship with you. I developed a friendship with you. I think you're my best friend. Okay, if you think I'm your best friend and you think I can take down the Empire that's holding your daughter hostage, why don't you then team up with me to take them down so that we can save her for you? You didn't have to betray anyone. You didn't have to do any of this. This was so unnecessary. And it came out of nowhere. It literally was the biggest, dumbest plot twist in history. That's a bit excessive, but you know what I mean. It was so unnecessary. So needless to say, when you finally find him again for the third time on Tanalorr, basically he starts he takes a complete 180. So he's like the nicest guy. He's probably like the most respectable guy that you've ever met. Han Solo type guy, right? And then when you meet up with him on Tanalorr, he just completely 180s and he just starts mowing down everything in his path, and he almost kills his daughter twice. This person that he is supposedly doing all of this for, he nearly kills twice. You're a horrible father, for one. This guy was the biggest idiot in the galaxy. Holy mother of God, this annoyed me so much. This plot was very mid to start with because it really didn't have one, but then when you got to this point, I wanted to turn it off. So then you finally get to Tanalorr, you finally confront Bode, you finally kill him, and then another prediction that I had, which was Bode would end up dead, his daughter would be force sensitive, and that Cal would recruit her by the end of the game. I was right. I was wrong about when Bode would die. I assumed he would die, or I predicted that he would die at the end of the prologue, but nevertheless, he still died. We still recruited the daughter because she's force sensitive. Star Wars as a whole has been anchored to one story for so long. They have other story potentials in the universe. They could do anything with these characters, but they still restrain them to one story. Will he or she fall to the dark side? No, because he finds a reason to stay on the light side, which is usually a family member. Oh my God, Star Wars as a whole has one story. One singular story. But that all being said, this game isn't all bad. As I said before, it is kind of boring for the most part because you're spending a lot of time just doing a lot of filler. It's a lot of fluff. There is a big section of the middle chunk of this game where you are just doing a fetch quest. 2 of them, in fact. But the gameplay, the worlds of this game, they do make up for it in some manner. I think that the story as a whole is very lackluster and it really doesn't do a whole lot for Cal anyway. So another thing that I didn't really talk about in the original video was Cal's descent into the dark side. So basically when this game starts, it's kind of hinted at that Cal might actually start falling to the dark side in this game. And me being the cynic that I am, I was like, he's not going to fall to the dark side. He might get tempted, but he'll end up just turning around and saying, nah, screw all that. I'm just going to stay on the light side. It's got better perks. But the fact that this game actually takes the time to really dive deep into the fact that Cal might actually turn to the dark side. It even has a couple of prompts that literally say, embrace the dark side. When I saw that, I was like, get the fuck out. Are you serious? Because pretty much any Star Wars story that has been under the Disney regime, right? So the sequel trilogy, for instance, with Rey, they were basically so afraid to even give her an edge that might tempt her to the dark side that she came off as like the most overpowered, super good, like infallibly good person that it was impossible to tempt her to the dark side. It was really disappointing in that trilogy because it was like, this is an interesting story that you could go down. And when they started with like Kylo Ren being like, hey, let's basically combine the two and forget the past. That was the most interesting part of The Last Jedi that I am forever going to be annoyed that they didn't follow through on that, because that was an interesting idea that they just didn't do anything with. The fact that they were willing to give Cal that edge and basically almost go all the way with it, props to this game. Like, I was actually just like, I was convinced from the start that it's like, nah, he's a Jedi. Jedi is literally in the title of the story. So you're not going to have him fall to the dark side. Don't give me hope. However, the problem is, I do think that while this story does lean towards it, it doesn't go all the way with it. Because like I said before, you get a couple of prompts that say, embrace the darkness. But outside of like a really cool montage of like just murdering a bunch of stormtroopers, you really don't get a whole lot with it. You can mow down a bunch of people. You can use it in the post game as well. It doesn't really do a whole lot for like the gameplay. Imagine this, right? You get to the end of the game and it comes up with that prompt, embrace the darkness. But maybe they do some subtle choice play where if you don't press that button, you don't turn to the dark side, but you still win the fight. Or you can press the button and turn to the dark side and start using more dark side powers and switching it up, switch up the gameplay. So like, if you actually do that, maybe instead of like force pulling and force pushing people, you can force choke people and force electrocute people. Like, imagine that. Imagine if they just went all the way with it. But I imagine they're probably holding that off for the third game, and if they are, I'm playing that game regardless of how I feel about this one. But if they start going all the way with that and actually introducing some of that into the gameplay, it would be game of the year. And it does make me worried because they do have a third game planned, and I'm kind of worried about how that game will go, because this game just, it was the most predictable shit on the planet. Like, Darth Vader was in this game, right? You fight Darth Vader, and it was the most useless boss fight in the game. Like, he is awesome. I loved fighting him. He was fucking hard. But his inclusion in this story is pointless. He didn't need to be in the story.
All right, that's it for me. Be good, everybody.
But at the end of the day, those are my thoughts. I think this game does have good gameplay. I think this game does have good worlds to explore. So if you're a Star Wars fan and you want to explore some new worlds, this game is great for it. But if you want a good, compelling story, this just ain't it, pal. I am long past the point where Star Wars as a whole has given me stories that just haven't been anything that I could sink my teeth into that I would enjoy. I haven't enjoyed a single Star Wars movie or story since the prequels. Like, once in a while there may be a story that comes out, but then it goes on for so long that it dulls my enjoyment. I can't even enjoy The Force Awakens anymore. I used to love The Force Awakens, but then as the story went on, it just diminished my love for it. Disney as a whole, with Star Wars, has just run it into the ground. They have just done the same thing, but worse, over and over and over again. And I'm just tired of it. If you guys enjoyed this, please consider liking, please consider subscribing, and I'll see you all next time.